This is the screencast for Chapter 17, Section 3, and we're going to be looking at the chemical hazards that we face. 17.2 focused on biological hazards, and that's where those diseases were talked about. If you didn't get a chance to finish those in class, I will be posting a screencast of 17.2 so that you can go back and fill in that chart at your convenience. So again, 17.3, this is going to be pretty short. We're going to talk about the very basics of those chemical hazards, and then your classwork is going to involve looking at three particular chemical hazards: PCBs, mercury, and BPA. Things that we've already talked about, but you're going to be looking a little bit more in depth at them. But again, chemical hazards are something we've become more and more aware of, as you see in the concept there, because there's growing concern that these chemicals will cause birth defects, cancer, disrupt the human immune system, our nervous system, and our endocrine system. And that's one of the more alarming ones and fun to talk about. So looking at chemicals that cause these different types of effects, we use the effects of the chemical to classify the chemical. And in your chart tomorrow that you're going to be working with, you'll see a row that's titled "How is it classified?" And these are those classifications that we're talking about. So as you take these notes, make sure that you realize that these are classifications of chemicals. So toxic chemicals cause temporary or permanent harm or death to humans and animals. Again, sort of like our definition for pollution, there are a lot of things that can fall underneath this category of being a toxic chemical. Temporary, permanent, death or harm. So lots and lots of things. So the first one you're probably familiar with, and that is a carcinogen. Carcinogen causes cancer. We're used to hearing that term, especially in relation to tobacco smoke. But you'll see there it's any chemical, radiation, or even a virus that can cause or promote cancer. And so tobacco smoke obviously causes or promotes lung cancer. UV radiation causes or promotes skin cancer. X-rays, vinyl chloride. So again, some of these things we think about as being actual chemicals. The vinyl chloride, you can see right there, chloride in the name. But some of them we maybe have not thought about that way before. But a carcinogen is considered a toxic chemical that promotes cancer. A mutagen is a chemical or form of radiation that causes mutations to your DNA. It can lead to cancer and other disorders. Again, a cancer is just a misfiring growth of your cells. And so, again, that can happen through a mutation in your cells that creates it to grow and grow out of proportion, and you might end up with a tumor. But again, anything that's altering your DNA, I like that term mutagen because it reminds me personally of the X-Men. And so I think about your DNA is getting messed up when you mutate. So again, the mutants, mutagens, DNA, it's all there. Again, cancer or other disorders. You can have mutations that lead to cancer. You can have mutations that lead to birth defects, and that's a more specific category we're going to talk about in a minute. But if it messes up your DNA, that DNA could potentially get passed on. Different with women and men because of the way we reproduce. Women's eggs are already formed, and so that DNA is already there even at birth, whereas with men, you're producing the sperm on an ongoing basis. And so those mutagens have a more likely effect to cause birth defects there. But an example is nitrite preservatives. You might notice a lot of times nowadays in the grocery store that your hot dogs will say nitrite free. And one of the reasons is we're very concerned that some of the preservatives that we're putting in our food could eventually cause mutations in our DNA. Now, teratogens. Teratogens are a category that causes harm or birth defects to a fetus or embryo. So you might have a teratogen that works by altering DNA, and then you're passing along a mutation. So a little bit of overlap there, but teratogens don't necessarily have to cause mutations in the way that we typically think about. Basically, though, it does harm the embryo, the fetus. It causes birth defects. So teratogen chemicals that cause harm or birth defects to fetus or an embryo. The best example there to talk about is tetracycline because it is a commonly prescribed acne medication, it's a commonly prescribed birth control medication, and it is a commonly prescribed antibiotic. The reason why it gets prescribed a lot to younger people is it works effectively as an acne medication. But if you are a female and you are prescribed tetracycline, it is automatically given to you in the form of a birth control pill. The reason for that is it will most definitely cause birth defects. So, to avoid the possibility that your acne medication could cause your fetus or embryo to be defected, they incorporate it with the estrogen, which means that you will not become pregnant. So tetracycline, again, given to females in their teens in a birth control form, even though they're getting it for acne. So if you've ever heard that line, yeah, I'm on birth control for my acne, it's very, very true. You cannot be on tetracycline with any risk of becoming pregnant. It will lead to some pretty severe birth defects. So again, those are some categories there for chemicals. Pathways on which toxic chemicals move through the environment. And I don't think this picture is any surprise. We know that chemicals can move from the atmosphere to our crops and to our water. They can move from the water to the atmosphere. We've talked about that with other chemical compounds, things like acid rain. We've talked about carbon cycling. We've talked about nitrogen cycles, phosphorus cycles. So I don't think any of this is a great surprise. Any chemical can move and cycle through the environment. Remember, that relates to our laws. We've got the law of conservation of matter. Can't get rid of it. So if there's a chemical out there, it's going to be moving around. And we are concerned about these chemicals getting into our water supply because if it's, let's say, tetracycline mixed with a birth control pill with estrogen, some of that is going to come out through the urine. It's going to get into our sewage water. It's going to be treated, but the medicine can't be removed. And so we do have quite a bit of antidepressants and quite a few estrogen and other hormone mimics that are in our water because we have taken prescription drugs. But then you've got these other things too, and you're going to learn about some of those tomorrow in class. So again, some of these chemicals are affecting our different systems. So let's look really quickly at what those systems are and how they're going to be affected. And this is also, again, going to be something on the chart that you're going to be looking at. So as you read about PCBs, mercury, and BPA, you need to be thinking about what systems are being affected and how could that potentially harm a person. So natural synthetic chemicals in the environment weaken and harm these different systems. First off, your immune system. When your immune system is attacked, then you're vulnerable to other infections. And again, I think about HIV with this one because if you have HIV, you don't die from the HIV itself. You die because you get pneumonia or you contract some other form of a disease because of a weakened immune system. And so some chemicals that might leave you vulnerable there are arsenic, methylmercury, and dioxins. Now, your nervous system. Nervous system is your brain, your nerves. When those are harmed, it can cause mental retardation, it can cause paralysis, again, talking about your nerves, and it can cause death. You've got to have your nervous system functioning fully in order to maintain basic homeostasis body functions. Examples there, you'll see an overlap. Methylmercury is on there again, arsenic is on there again, PCBs, and lead. And so we do, again, have some of these chemicals that are going to work on multiple body systems. And that's one of the reasons why we get so concerned with something like a mercury poisoning. And then there's your endocrine system, and your endocrine system is in control of your hormones. And so this is the system that we've talked about before when we say, if men are going to be drinking water that has excess estrogen from female birth control pills, that they can actually increase their breast tissue size. And these men in England, the study was conducted, these men are having to get breast reduction surgeries from the drinking water. This is also one of the reasons why hormones are now removed from chicken. Big play on all the commercials the last couple years to say, Purdue, we don't use any hormones on our chicken. It's now illegal for them to do it because so many of them had been, that we started to really see the age of menstruation, the age at which a girl would get her period, was decreasing more and more. There's hormones in our milk, there's hormones in our chicken, there's hormones in our drinking water. And so it was no surprise that girls as young as second grade or third grade were getting estrus and beginning to menstruate. So that is very alarming that we're able to do that through these chemicals that mimic our natural hormones in our endocrine system. Now, we are going to talk about a couple different types of endocrine disruptors, what we call them. So things that are going to mess with our endocrine system. First one is the hormonally active agents, HAAs. These are classified either as gender benders, they affect your reproductive systems, or thyroid disruptors, affect your growth, weight, brain, and behavior. Now, sometimes you might take a medicine so that you can have these effects, and the one that comes to mind is affecting growth. You might actually be prescribed a steroid as a child so that you will grow because maybe you're lagging behind. But sometimes we don't want that to be the case either. So if we affect our thyroid, it has a large effect. Your thyroid is a big homeostasis keeper for your body. The gender benders, I know we've talked about this before with the alligators, where they had ingested so much of a testosterone mimic that it shrunk the size of their penis, and they were no longer able to reproduce effectively. And so those gender benders can be some really messy stuff. You have fish that are, because their eggs are in the water system, you have certain fish that literally change genders from when they're born to when they're laid as eggs to when they are born. They will actually change their genders. And so this is some very interesting stuff. Then you've got phthalates. Phthalates are used to soften PCV plastics. And so, any plastic bottle, anything that's not hard, brittle plastic has a phthalate in it. And what we figured out is that those phthalates are linked to birth defects, liver cancer, premature breast development, immune system suppression, abnormal sexual development. And this is why you start to hear all the backlash against things like BPA, because those are what phthalates are. It's in your shower curtains. It's all around us because we didn't know for a long time that this stuff was dangerous. And one of my soapbox items I'll get up there and tell you guys is you're not supposed to microwave plastic. You're not supposed to microwave styrofoam. These little tiny chemicals will come off and into your food and you will ingest them. So if you're microwaving the macaroni and cheese from last night, put it on a nice ceramic or glass plate before you microwave it, or else those phthalates come out of the plastic and they get into your food. And this is a little diagram that's in your book about how hormone blockers and hormone mimics work. And so you can see that they are shaped to fit right into that lock and key system you learned about back in biology, so that the chemicals fit into the receptors in your cells, tricking your cells into thinking that they're being exposed when they're not really. And so you might block out the real hormone, or you might mimic that hormone so well that your body responds to it. And so there's different mechanisms and pathways that it would work. But again, this is in your book. And that's the end. That's the last slide for this little short section on our chemical hazards. So again, please look for the disease chart and you'll be able to fill that in as well.